Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook podcast. It's Paul here coming to you from a slightly different setup than usual. I'm actually working out of my office today versus the normal podcast studio. And we don't have an in-person guest today. We actually have someone joining us from the north, if you will, our neighbors to the north, as we were just discussing. He's actually from Ottawa, Canada. His name is Brad Cartier. How are you, Brad?
I'm good, Paul. How you doing?
Doing pretty well, my friend. Thank you for asking. Trying to think of the best way to intro you here. No, I'll say Brad actually is, he's well-versed in the podcast world himself. I've seen some other appearances that he's done. He's a real estate developer, multitude of other things. I'll let him tell you about that in a second here. But Brad, for the people out there that don't know anything about you, how would you explain your career and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Paul. Really appreciate it. Very multifaceted, but it all comes down at the end of the day to real estate. So as you mentioned, I'm a real estate investor and developer. I'm also a marketing consultant for real estate technology companies. So those are sort of the two main verticals that take up my time these days. And more so on the development, building new multifamily developments and real estate projects. Both short-term, medium-term, and long-term residential typically.
Excellent. So, Brad, can I ask you, how did you get into the world of real estate? I mean, what kind of inspired you to follow this path?
Yeah, I about 15 years ago, I bought my first rental property with a business partner of mine, and I, since a young age, I've always had an entrepreneurial bent. At 13, I started my own web development company back when it was HTML and you actually had to type things out. Back in the early days of the dial-up modems, and you're probably too young to remember those, Paul. But I was always entrepreneurial, and real estate just really jumped out to me early on in my life. And I had a work colleague. Who invested in real estate, and he and I started talking about his portfolio and why he invested, and it really just struck me as something that I wanted to get myself involved in. So bought my first rental property, like I mentioned, 15 years ago, and haven't really looked back.
Excellent. So I was doing a little bit of research on you, as I tend to do, and I saw that you also have like a leaning on the development side to, like, I guess you would call it commercial. I'm not really sure how you would classify it, but I saw a really interesting project that you did, which was some sort of campsite. I was wondering if you could explain that at all.
Yeah, for sure. So that's Hammond Hill, hammondhill.ca if anyone wants to check it out. This is a new project that we developed throughout COVID. So quite a few challenges building and supply chains and labor. But it's a 62-acre eco resort. So we have right now 50 accommodation types there, whether it's campsites, yurts, cabins. We also have a partnership with Jupe. They're a glamping tent manufacturer in Texas. We're going to be their first international expansion, so we're going to have 12 of their glamping tents on our property by the end of the month. We have walking trails, we have a beer garden, we have a lake, we have tons of events up there. We have an outdoor wedding chapel, so it's really it's a full-on, like I mentioned, eco resort located next to a golf course and a brewery as well. So there's sort of a family of businesses that are involved in that one, and it's still relatively new. We've only developed about 8 acres of the 62 acres, so quite a bit more to come on that project.
Well, that's awesome, man. If I'm ever up in Ottawa, I'll have to come visit.
Yeah, absolutely. You're more than welcome.
Appreciate that. As you can see, my camera just died, but we're back.
No worries.
So, Brad, I guess I should have probably clarified this, but in your obviously very diverse investment portfolio, I'm sure there's some residential properties in there, yes?
Yeah, I heavily lean towards residential. A very small component is commercial, and like the Hammond Hill project is short-term rentals, still in the residential category, maybe tourism commercial, but mostly long-term rentals, small multifamily.
Okay, awesome. So I asked because I've spoken to several agents at our brokerage who, or not even agents, just individuals who are interested in building out a portfolio of their own. And I think people tend to lean residential when they are approaching something like this. So I'm wondering, because obviously you've got quite a number of properties under your belt. How did you mentioned how you got your start? You had a business partner that was doing something similar, but how did you get it, or scale it rather, to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. And really, that's just surrounding myself with a great team and business partners. So yeah, like I mentioned, even my first rental property, I had a business partner involved, and almost everything I've done in terms of real estate beyond that has been with either a business partner or other type of investors or partners. So really, I mean, the ability to scale up, nothing good happens in isolation. I found, at least in business. So surrounding myself with like-minded partners and, with a diverse range of skills. For instance, no one wants to see these hands swinging a hammer. I'm not handy at all. So I definitely needed partners on that front. And but yeah, I think partnerships are key to that.
Makes sense. So I guess perhaps when you're first starting out, it might make sense to go it alone, so to speak. But to scale up to a level that you're at, it just doesn't make sense to roll solo, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you can develop a very interesting and profitable portfolio of real estate as an individual with no partners. I'm not saying that's not possible. I know a lot of people who have done that successfully, but for where I wanted to go and the scale I wanted to go, it's just not possible to do that. Do that in isolation, and still maintain some semblance of work-life balance and family time and all that kind of stuff.
Makes sense. Which actually brings me to another question I wanted to ask you, which is about that three-letter word there, or three-letter phrase, work-life balance. It's highly debated, especially on this podcast, of how to achieve the ideal work-life balance, and something I think a lot of people, not just agents, but anyone in the real estate world, might struggle with, because, as you know, a lot of times you're on call. So it's hard often to balance having a family, or managing just your personal life alongside your career. I'm wondering, do you have any tips or tricks that you employ that kind of help you find that work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it per se as work-life balance. I mean, everything that I do from a business perspective, I absolutely love doing. Outside of a few annoyances here and there, I'm very passionate about what I do. So I'm very deliberate in the business opportunities that I choose to go down those rabbit holes. So I don't, for me personally, I'm excited when I get up in the morning on Monday to come down to my office and start the week. So I don't necessarily see it as balancing one over the other. And also, I have four kids at home, so there's definitely quite a bit of work there as well. But I mean, my two oldest daughters have helped me in various businesses. At the campsite, they come up and they help tidy up and help with little designs here and there. And anytime I go to a property, the kids want to come and just see what's going on. So really involving them in the business as well. Not forcing them to be involved in the business, but trying to excite them about it. So yeah, I don't really have any tips or tricks. That's probably a very unsatisfactory answer to a very good question, but I don't necessarily see it as balancing the two. To me, they're very blended and complementary.
No, I think that was actually a great answer, because you touched on something that our CEO actually employs in his own career, and it's something that he kind of quotes in trainings, which is build a life that you don't need a vacation from. So I think that's kind of in line with what you're saying, as to, if you really love what you do, you don't find that the stress that one might feel in a career that they're not satisfied with bearing a burden on your personal life, so to speak. So I think that's actually quite a great answer. So don't knock yourself there, man.
No, and I appreciate that. I think your CEO is absolutely right. And it's not to say there's not stresses. I mean, we're dealing with multi-million-dollar developments, and yeah, there's stresses, and there's people depending on me and us and my team, and there's definitely there's risks and stressors. But like you said, if you like what you're doing, then you're never going to really need a vacation from it. And even when I go on vacation with my family, I look forward to an hour every day, just open the laptop and seeing how things are going and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I 100% agree with that.
That's awesome, man. I got to ask too, just kind of to circle back up top to what we were talking about. Have you ever considered actually becoming an agent yourself? Is there a reason that you chose this approach versus what many might consider a more traditional approach of being an actual agent? That might be a strange question to ask, but I'm curious.
No, I mean, no, it's a great question, Paul. I have thought about it. I work with some really strong agents, so I never really felt the need to get my license myself just to save on a few percentage points per transaction. And also, we're buy and hold investors, so I very rarely am selling properties. So the need on my end to do that kind of certification wasn't really there.
Makes sense. Different strokes for different folks, as they say, you know? So, Brad, talking about the world of real estate, something I know that you're well versed in is market conditions. Before we kind of get into that a little bit more, I'm curious because obviously, I mentioned it up top, but we're in different countries, right? So, and I'll admit that I myself, while I do keep up, obviously, with the United States housing market, that sort of thing, can't say I've been kept keeping up with that in Canada. So I'm wondering, because you are a well versed and well informed person, have you seen the two kind of mirroring each other, or I'm not sure if you can comment on any comparison you can make there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and in all honesty, they're very, very similar. And what's good for one is generally good for the other. What we see happening in the U.S. generally has a follow-on effect into Canada, so they're very, very intertwined. Prices are a bit different. Where our average home price in Canada is about double what it is in the U.S.
Ooh.
Affordability is quite a huge issue up here, as it is in the U.S. as well. But generally speaking, they're very similar. Regulations are a bit tighter up here, whether it's banking regulations or zoning regulations. But overall, it's very similar.
Makes sense, and I'm glad to have learned that. So that being said, I'm wondering if you can make any. I know many folks in the real estate world might hesitate to make predictions, that sort of thing. There's no crystal ball, as they say. But being well versed in your market, what would you say that agents or just people that, or even a consumer, could be? What's the word here? Should be predicting in the coming months or perhaps years.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could talk about inflation. We could talk about supply. We could talk about, affordability and density and zoning and all that kind of stuff. The big thing folks are talking about now and thinking about is interest rates, and they've been going up. They've been at historical lows for since the Great Recession. And I think last time I looked at the 30-year average, it was about 5.1%. I think tomorrow the Fed in the U.S. is meeting. It's all but expected that they will raise it half a percentage point, just to help combat inflation. So I think that's the biggest thing that's top of mind to not only consumers but agents and policymakers. I see over the next 2 years a cooling of the housing market. You see a lot of people calling for, the housing crash or a housing bubble. I don't necessarily see that being the case. There's so much that's different right now than what was existing in 2006 prior to the credit crisis then. We have such a low supply of homes and such high demand that I don't see prices crashing. Although I do see a cooling effect taking place. We're seeing pending sales down, we're seeing competition down, and we're seeing sales volume decrease at least a little bit, which are all going to act as downward pressure on home price growth. I don't think home prices are going to go into negative growth territory, but they're definitely not going to be going up the 20% year over year that we've seen over the last few years. And there's positives and negatives to that, and I can get into that, but that's just where we're at now. And generally, I think it's a good thing. I think a cooling housing market is a more balanced housing market, and rising interest rates are also going to help with that, because it's going to keep people on the sidelines from selling and also on the sidelines from buying. So I think overall, it's going to be a more balanced market over the next 2 years.
Well, that's great to hear, especially for someone in my generation who that we're being told that home ownership is becoming increasingly more difficult. So I wanted to ask you from that perspective, because some of this stuff is a little out of my depth. I'm not licensed myself, but I do like to stay up on the trends and whatnot. So for all of what you just covered there, how would you say that would directly impact like the average home buyer? Are they going to see purchasing power increase? You say the market will become more balanced, so it's hard for me to understand how that affects buyers, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and it's so complicated, Paul. I mean, just take inflation for instance. it's not necessarily good for people who are trying to get into the housing market, because inflation generally increases asset prices and increases the cost of living. Assuming your wages aren't keeping up with that inflation, so it makes purchasing that much more difficult. But with rising interest rates, with fewer people wanting to sell, then and fewer buyers out there, then that might put downward pressure on home prices. So it might get a little bit easier in that sense. And with competition down, you're less likely to overpay for a home. So there's so much at play that I think it's very difficult to tell. But I think over the next 2 years, even though we're going to see a housing cooling, I think it's still going to be difficult for first-time home buyers, just because we have that those inflationary pressures coupled with all the supply pressures that we're having. Even if home builders wanted to keep up with the demand for new housing, the supply chains won't let them right now, because we're still seeing the lingering impacts of COVIDs, and the war in Europe is significantly hampering that as well. So I think it's still going to be really challenging to get into the housing market over the next 24 months for first time home buyers, which I don't think that's a good thing.
That's kind of the answer I anticipated, but I appreciate you going into some detail there, Brad. So that's all great information, man. So like I've been kind of tooting your horn a little bit here, you're obviously well read on the subject matter. Something you and I kind of talked about over email is a newsletter that you create yourself or your team does there. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Paul. Always like to plug the newsletter. It's really simple. It's a free newsletter. We send out a weekly email on Friday mornings, and we address one topic every week that we feel is important to real estate watchers, whether it's agents, brokers, investors, any professionals in the real estate sector. Excuse me. We talk about things like zoning and interest rate increases. Last week, we talked about home price increases in equity. The week before, we talked about the relationship between treasuries and interest rates. And we really try to take complicated issues like that and really distill it down to layman's terms, to make it a lot more accessible and digestible to those who are, in the real estate industry, but aren't necessarily economists who want to read through a 100-page Fannie paper just to understand what does this mean to my business. So I don't know if you've read one of the newsletters yet, Paul, but we really try to have fun with them as well. So we use very engaging language, and we try to inject a little bit of humor into it as well. So I encourage people to head over to briefcase.email, sign up, check it out. If it's not for you, then unsubscribe. But we have a lot of fun writing it, and it's been growing substantially by the day, the subscriber count. So I'm very, very humbled by the feedback I've been getting from the subscribers.
Well, that's awesome, Brad. And I love to pass that on to our agents, because I know that they appreciate the quote real approach, I guess, to those sort of things. Because as you said, they are not the types to be digesting the reports out there. So, and we get a lot of them. So I guess, if they do want to sign up, they just visit that, briefcase.email, and just kind of plug their email in there.
Yep, absolutely. And that's that weekly newsletter comes directly from me. So if anyone wants to reach out as well, they can just hit reply to those emails, and I'll get that right in my inbox.
Very cool. I appreciate that information, Brad. I'll probably be checking it out myself, to be honest. So just to kind of round it out here, Brad, I wanted to talk a little bit more about you, just because we do that here, So in your career, my friend, what would you say has been your biggest strength that's allowed you to succeed at such a high level?
I think a couple things. Number one, laser focused on execution. I am very persistent, and I very diligent when it comes to productivity and my to-do list. So very, very laser focused on execution, but also at the same time being able to surround myself with like-minded partners. Couldn't do it without the team I have around me, and there's probably a short list of about 4 or 5 people who've really enabled the different businesses I'm involved in to get off the ground and succeed. So I think being a good judge of character and laser focus on execution would be my strengths.
Being a good judge of character is important, because you meet a lot of people in this field, I will say.
Yeah, a lot of snake oil salesmen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first podcasts we did, I was talking to our director of sales, and we mentioned I used to work at a car dealership, so I can kind of pick those out of the crowd. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So on that same note, Brad, everybody has obstacles, hurdles that they face. What sorts of things have you been trying to overcome, or have you overcome in the past in your career?
Yeah, I think early on I suffered quite a bit from imposter syndrome, where like I didn't really, I had that negative self-talk, like who am I to be doing this kind of thing? I'm no expert. I'm just, regular ordinary Brad. But with some good business coaching and some reflection, I overcame that. And I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to hire a business coach or any type of life coach or anything like that to do so. That definitely changed my perspective. I mean, the downside to being so entrepreneurial and focused on new business opportunities and optimizing and scaling and all that kind of stuff is, and you probably have this too, Paul, is shiny object syndrome. I have business ideas all the time, and I see great opportunities and potential partnerships and things I could be doing. So really trying to focus my attention on the core businesses that are really going to move the needle for me and my family and my business partners. That is my current biggest challenge, because as you know, opportunity is everywhere, and the more success you have, the more that seems to fall on your lap in terms of additional opportunities. So really being able to say no, 9 times out of 10 say no, and then that last time you can say yes. But that's been my biggest struggle as of late.
Absolutely. I've never heard shiny object syndrome as the term for it before, but I like that. And then Brad, what was it that you just touched on that I wanted to mention? The coaching. I think that's a great point as well. We have a lot of people that come over on here that are agents producing at a high level that say the same exact thing as you. I never would have been able to get here without my mentor, my coach, whatever it might have been. I don't know. Is your coach, are they like a public coach that you might want to plug, or perhaps not?
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce Firestone, just plug him into Google. He's got his own website. He's a real estate and business focused coach, and he has clients all over the world. He's the one who really honed in, sort of steer me away from those shiny objects, and really helped articulate and help me focus on what was important to the businesses I was currently working on, and how to free up my time and enable other people in a much more productive way. So it's sort of like you're 80% of the way there, but to get that extra, optimizing for that extra 20% is just so difficult. So sometimes you need to bring someone from the outside in to really who has a significant amount of experience, and Bruce certainly has that, to just sort of do that last little bit of tinkering and get you on in the right direction.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm sure some of our agents could use that extra push. So the other thing you did touch on that I wanted to mention was the imposter syndrome, because we had another agent on here who mentioned something similar. And I think her quote was that she had to basically give herself permission to make the money that she was making. Does that kind of make sense? Do you feel that you kind of had a similar approach?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, that was mostly around raising investor capital early on. The amount of the check size that was being given to our development company, just really was, the projects were great, and I like everything was good. It just sort of hit home when, other people were signing over checks, and these are people I know and friends and family. That's where it really hit home. Like, who am I to be taking, these people's money? And then, it took a while to get over that. And especially it's, as we start to give that money back and more, it starts to help out with that. But that was definitely a struggle early on.
Makes sense, man. Well, I'm glad that you have overcome that, so to speak. I want to ask this because I always get interesting answers to this question. Had you not chosen real estate development as your career path, what else might you have chosen?
Oh,
That's usually the reaction.
that's a really good question. I actually worked for the Canadian government for 10 years, so I probably would still be doing that before I left.
Interesting. I got to ask because I'm a politics oriented guy myself. What's the sentiment about Trudeau up there?
Well, we had the whole Freedom Convoy thing.
That's right. Sorry about that.
Nothing interesting ever happens in Canada. We always look at the Americans and to get our titillating news, because you guys are all doing crazy stuff, and nothing interesting ever happens in Canada until the Freedom Convoy. But no, there was definitely some displeasure with. I'm not a political person. There's always going to there's always going to be displeasure with any party that's been in office as long as the federal Liberals have been. So yeah, I think overall his ratings are pretty good, and I think all things considered, we came out of the pandemic fairly well off. So I think despite the Freedom Convoy's displeasure with Mr. Trudeau, I think he's doing an okay job.
Good to hear, man. Sorry to lead you down that path, but I was just curious, and we'll keep giving you good news, my friend. Don't worry about that. So, Brad, I really appreciate your time, man. I just wanted to ask you one last question, which is just how we end every episode. Usually I ask for people to give advice to agents, but I suggest that I guess your approach would be a little bit different. I guess anyone in the real estate world, if you could give them a piece of advice, what would that advice be? And I know that can be hard at times.
Yeah, I think I think specifically for me, and I actually had a conversation with a young real estate entrepreneur out of DC a couple days ago, and he asked a very similar question. And I think I'll just repeat what I said there, because I think it's definitely applicable to a broader audience. But it's all about the singles and doubles in my mind, and in the business world. It doesn't necessarily have to be real estate. I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs, and they're looking for those grand slams. They're looking to become the next unicorn in a business sense. And I think the most successful people I know are folks who just consistently hit singles and doubles. That is, start a business. It does, you don't need to grow to be $1 billion. Just look for opportunities to say yes, and to work on something that you're passionate about, and hopefully will make you some money, and just keep rinsing and repeating that.
In other words, pace yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, man. We have a lot of people that, just as you said, which I think this might be in line with the shiny object syndrome again. They start their career in real estate and they take on too many leads or too many clients or whatever it might be, and they quickly find themselves in a state of burnout. So I think that's great advice, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, this was a great interview, man. I really appreciate your time. I wanted to ask, is there anything else besides from the newsletter that you might want to plug?
Nope. That's it. Head over to the briefcase.email and sign up.
Well, we will blast that out, my friend. It'll be on the screen if people are watching on YouTube, and then obviously in the description for anywhere else. Brad, I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Paul. This was fun. We'll do it again.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I hope you have a great one up there in the snowy north. Perhaps not snowy now, but...
Not now, but a few weeks ago it was, for sure.
Oh, man. I'm jealous. Florida, we haven't seen that in like 50 years or something like that.
Well, when you come up for camping, hopefully it doesn't snow.
There you go, man. Hey, all right, everyone else out there, really appreciate you tuning in. As always, the social media links at the Real Estate Playbook. Make sure you subscribe if you're on YouTube, drop a like on Spotify, review on Apple Music, so on and so forth. Thank you again to Brad, and make sure you go check out his newsletter, briefcase.email. Have a great day.